All right, let's discuss the Auditor-General's findings. We're joined by Paul Berkowitz, Director at the Third Republic, and Dr Tim Maake, Local Government Specialist. Let me start with you, Dr Maake. It's always a little bit complicated because of the auditing terminology around clean audits, unqualified, qualified. Just try and tell us, looking at the detail, what this report tells you about municipalities in South Africa in general.
Thanks, Francisca. I think, and to your viewers as well, the report of the Auditor General, firstly, is not coming as a surprise. It is something that we have become used to as a country. You'll recall that year in, year out, the Auditor General will raise serious concerns about the state of financial management in municipalities. And this is something that has to get to a point where we zoom into what are the real cost factors as opposed to the symptoms, because we have been focusing much on the symptoms for quite a long time. But we need to begin to say, what are the real cost factors? Because they are real cost factors, and we shouldn't shy away from dealing with them. And you see, when the Auditor General talks about the municipalities that are able to, keep their books clean, that simply means that those are the audit outcomes without any material findings. And when it's unqualified, it simply means that there are certain issues that the Auditor General is still not satisfied with. Then that will be an unqualified with a material findings. And you will have a qualified one wherein there are serious issues that if they are not attended to, the municipality will either regress into a disclaimer or any of those unwarranted audits. And where there's a disclaimer, it simply means that the Auditor General could not lay their hands on documentation to justify certain transactions that have gone through into the books of municipalities. So that simply means that the policy environment is quite good, but there is something that is wrong, and that is where we need to focus on.
And I'm going to come back to you about that. But first, let me throw a quick question to you, Mr. Berkowitz. What he's outlined is that it's not always corruption or fraud or hiding things in the financial books. Sometimes processes weren't followed. But I guess the more findings there are across all these municipalities, the more scope there is for corruption and fraud that is hidden.
Yes, that's true. But let me be blunt. There is no reason at this stage, in the 22nd year of local government, for there to be mistakes in the books, for there to be, for them not to be prepared in time for the Auditor General's office to do their work, for supply chain management processes to not be followed. We could be very generous, but probably naive to chalk that up to incompetence. There's more evidence that a dysfunctional municipality which can't keep track of its spending is a necessary requirement for corruption and maladministration and theft to thrive. And that's what's happening in a lot of cases.
Dr Maake, do you agree?
Well, that's so true, because if you look at where we come from as local government, from the time when the local government was still in what we call an establishment phase. Now we should have been in a sustainable phase over a long period of time. But the look of things tells us that we are not yet there. And that's why we need to look at the underlying factors that makes us not to be there. Primarily because the systems are in place, the policies are in place. As my colleague says, there's no reason at this point in time to still have municipalities that are dysfunctional.
So what are the underlying factors? Just looking back over the years, one of the things that's often been cited is cadre deployment. So people are given financial positions, but they are actually political appointments. You need skilled people. What about the pay? How do you attract the right skills? Because this is incredible that 70% of municipalities are bringing in consultants. So they have a chief financial officer, they have all these financial people, but they still bring in consultants just to get their financial records done. Dr Maake.
You see, let's start here. before we even get to talk about the appointment of incompetent people and the like, I want us to start, when we have to look at the causal factors, is to say, firstly, local government must be managed like a business, because local government is dealing mostly with the trading services. Local government produces water, it sells water to the end users, and it must derive its resources from the business that it is involved in, even though in terms of the laws, local government cannot make profit. Hence, there is what we call the equitable shares and other grants. But the fundamental thing, where it starts, is that are we able to produce capable leaders at a political level who, when they go into the system, they are able to interrogate all the reports that are brought before them? And my simple answer is that you will only find that in most affluent municipalities where they could be able to get better audit outcomes. But in most municipalities, you get a situation whereby most of the councillors, and even the SALGA report, the previous term, did concede to the fact that most of the councillors, some of them did not even have matric. Now you tell me, how is that person going to be able to relate or interact with the financial expenditure report or the Section 71 report or Section 72 report, which has got financial transactions that needs to be correctly interpreted? And that's where we start. So which means our political parties should begin to think on the basis of saying, let's make sure that whoever who has to be on our list of candidates has got some level of education that will enable them to add value when they go into the system, despite the fact that they still have to make sure that they implement their manifestos as per the elections. Once you get that right, you will then be able to eradicate the kind of turnover that we have in local government. Because I can tell you, in certain municipalities, a municipal manager will only spend not more than 24 or 36 months in the system and he's fired. And when he's fired, the replacement does not look almost near to what is ideal for a person who's supposed to run an institution such as a municipality, which is a business. Yeah. And I think that's where we need to begin to say, let's first make sure that when the election periods come, can we impress on the political parties to make sure that at least we get what would be able to assist municipalities to get the appropriate skills, because for you to be able to make sure that you get the appropriate skills, you need to be able to have people who would be able to appreciate the fact that their role and responsibility is quite very huge. Yeah. But the third element...
At least, Dr. Maake, the political parties were talking about that. Mr. Berkowitz, do you agree that this is where we start with... Dr. Maake has pointed out that it's not only the accounting officers who are relying on consultants, but they are dealing with councillors, and there needs to be a financial literacy to facilitate that exchange.
I agree with a few things that Dr. Maake has said. It's a difficult terrain. There is a lot of legislation at local government level. There's a lot of compliance. There's a lot of administrative. However, it's not just small municipalities. Mangaung and Nelson Mandela Bay are two metros which are on the brink of collapse. There are two metros which have had problems with appointing municipal managers. In the case of Mangaung, the former municipal manager was grossly underqualified. And in the case of Nelson Mandela Bay, the ANC could not convince its coalition partners to support their choice of municipal manager because she was so badly compromised and under a cloud of corruption. So with respect, and to be quite blunt, the biggest problem is corruption, it's impunity, it's a lack of accountability. The Auditor-General herself has made that quite clear in her report. It's not the first time that she's made that comment. She made the same comments in her report, and the former Auditor-General, Mr. Makwetu, made that comment himself for a number of years when he was Auditor-General. It is a lack of political will. It is a sick, twisted form of intergovernmental relations where corruption is enabled and connected at the municipal and provincial level. Particularly, you can see it in provinces like the Free State and in Northwest, where the auditor results showed quite clearly, but the rot is much deeper and the details and the story is much more tragic.
Yeah, the Free State and Northwest
and it's no coincidence.
No clean audits, Mr. Berkowitz. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I hope we can chat to both of you again, because you're looking at this from different angles. So thank you for your time. Paul Berkowitz, Director at the Third Republic, and Dr. Tim Maake, Local Government Specialist. And my colleague Bongiwe will be speaking to one of the former politicians to look at Nelson Mandela Bay specifically.